Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. What's your best story about instantly quitting from your job? Part 2. Around 15 years ago, I worked part-time at an ISP in a small college town. During one of my shifts over the weekend, there was only one other tech and me. The phone system worked so that calls would be picked up by both techs at different times. I saw that I was getting a lot of calls and looked at the system to see that the other tech had blocked himself from getting calls. What's going on? I check out his station and see that he brought his PC from home to play World of Warcraft. Not much was done about it because he was senior and made friends with some of the higher-ups. In the end, he was moved up to DSL sales and started getting paid on commission. In one day's memo to tech support, it said that we should offer the new service to everyone who called for help and check to see if they were qualified. If they were, we'd fill out a form and send it to sales to be signed. The person who didn't do anything was named at the bottom of the memo. I couldn't believe it. Do you know that he would get credit and pay for our work while we did it? When I was done, I logged off, told my boss I wasn't coming back, and left. Later, it turned out that the company had been up to no good, and it was bought out about a year later. Did work for a company that did shipping audits. The main thing they do is make sure that transportation companies charge businesses the right amount. These businesses save a lot of money every week. The way our business was run was terrible. It had a worse turnover rate than McDonald's, 48% per year. These things stood out. One of the long-fired techs put the hard drives in their server in the wrong way. He didn't back up the data, RAID 1, but instead set them up for performance, RAID 0. Because one of the drives broke, there was no power for weeks. It also lost a huge amount of client data. We didn't know which carriers to pay because we had millions of dollars on hand. Customers were calling nonstop and carriers were desperate to get the money they were owed because it was their only way to make a living. But we had no idea who was owed what. The CEO told everyone not to tell anyone outside the company what was going on. Instead, they were to hide it, play it down, etc. In the end, all of our clients had to send us their information again from the previous months, and they were furious. Because of the high turnover, the only person who knew how to use the old secret programs was someone who had already left the company. They were often paid a lot of money to come in and fix problems for a short time. But there wasn't much written down, and because people were moving around, information was lost and there wasn't much training. Since I started working there, the director was the only person who had been there longer than a year. He or she died of cancer soon after I started. Later, my boss quit because he could make more money somewhere else. Of course, there was no programmer manager either. The sysadmin manager had a lot of problems with people, so he or she would come and go at random and barely talk to anyone. In this case, pretty much everyone answered to the CEO. We suddenly needed to renew our Windows license, but didn't have the money to do so. We also ran out of IDs, so we couldn't hire any new clients or employees. Programs also stopped sending money, and we couldn't change them to pick up where they left off, so we had to send clients a lot of duplicate messages and reports. They paid per report, among other problems. There were more problems, like the fact that one kid was taken off one team and put in charge of junior programming. He didn't know what to do and didn't have a manager, so he didn't work at all day. Since they were paid the most, the two programmers who had the most experience and knew the most about the company's software were both fired. There were now only junior programmers left. They had major security problems, like letting anyone schedule an email to be sent from any email address to any other email address. To test this, I set up an email from the CEO's own address to be sent to a coworker at midnight. Some people who were no longer our clients or employees but still had working IDs from years ago were a security risk because no one was making sure that old credentials were being used no longer. And Telnet is all you need to connect and send commands. Teams would get together once a week for an hour to build relationships, and the whole company would go on fun trips. There would also be meetings to talk about problems and why they aren't being fixed, but no action was ever taken. The business was run by a family. One of them, second in command and in charge of sales, stopped showing up for no reason, and no one would say when or if they would return. Another person worked in IT and had quit many times before but was begged to come back. The CEO would make people work crazy hours when they couldn't even if they wanted to, but they would gladly fire the smartest workers. The reason I finally gave up? They didn't want to spend the little money they did have on employees training them or updating software that stopped them from getting new business. Instead, they bought spy software that records every keystroke, takes screenshots of every employee's screen every 15 seconds, and keeps track of how long it's been since the last time your mouse moved. I quit my job and got rid of all the notes and files I had made for myself to help with my work. All of that wasn't worth $15 an hour when every worker at a fast food restaurant I walked by every day got paid the same. I worked in IT for a business for 2.5 years. My boss, the senior tech who had been there for 13 years, and I made up the department. Boss, who had worked for the company for 23 years, decided to leave. Before she left, she told the boss not to promote the senior tech because he's too careless and can't do the job. They didn't pay attention. He got a raise and I got an extra $5 an hour. After that, he had to hire a new tech. You might think it would be pretty easy to hire someone. Look for someone with experience or schooling that can be trained. During the last few weeks, a friend of mine worked as an IT contractor. They had been doing this job for about 7 years. Before talking to anyone else, the new boss talks to my friend who was recommended and tells him he won't be considered. At the same time, he gives me a lot of work to do and trains me to do his old tasks. He also expects me to do the normal day-to-day things and teach the new guy. Even though none of the projects should be done, he's willing to kiss up to the other managers. After that, he hires a new programmer. He has never worked as a tech support person, and he didn't know much about Windows 10 when I first started training him. He had to learn how to handle simple tickets for about a month. I yelled at the new boss for about 45 minutes, going over all the mistakes he's made since he was promoted. This happened a week after the new person was hired. He did nothing but sit there in silence the whole time and look embarrassed. I told HR what he did was wrong every time he tried to defend it. It should have been done differently or not at all. What should he do? HR asked when I told them about all the stupid projects he shouldn't have taken on. Don't say that? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, was my answer. To end my rant, I left a 2-page letter with my complaints and 2 months' notice. When I walked out, I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders in shock. I worked out the rest of my 2 months with the manager being a jerk to me, which made me certain I had made the right decision. After getting a $5 an hour raise, I found a job that paid about $20,000 more than the one I had before. I just talked to the maintenance worker from my old job, and he said that the new guy left soon after me. Residents who have/had an HOA, tell your story of encountering these people. Part 2. We fixed up our condo so that it would be ready to sell. The plumber turned off the unit's water and the pipe broke in his hand. He jumps up and runs outside to find the valve that turns off the water to our unit. The only valve that turns off the water is for the whole side of our complex, which has about 24 to 32 units, and there is a big sign that says no one but XYZ Plumbing can touch valves. He calls the number and they say it'll be 3 to 4 hours before they can come out. At the same time, tons of water are pouring into our condo. It's enough for my plumber, who says F it and turns off the valve. Well, guess what? The plastic pipes are 25 years old and have been outside in the weather. It also fell apart. Water is no longer coming into my condo and every unit in the complex as a whole. Hundreds of thousands of gallons of water are also being dumped into the ground. They finally get the water turned off and the pipes fixed after a few more calls. I was told that a bill would be coming soon. XYZ Plumbing told me that those valves should have been replaced 7 years ago and that I shouldn't pay anyone anything. The HOA made me fight for a month and a half before they finally told me I didn't have to pay. Another month goes by and I have a contract on the unit. Yay! I only have to lose $45,000 on this terrible investment. Along with the closing papers, there is a $6,800 bill from the HOA. When the closing lawyer called, he or she asked if we had been paying our HOA fees. I told him what was going on and fought with the management company over the phone for 3 days before they agreed to drop the charge and let me move on. It was a bad dream. I will never again live in an HOA-run neighborhood. My parents built a house in 2000 that wasn't a part of an HOA on a private road/dead end with only one other house. In the summer of 2001, my parents were contacted by the HOA that was made up of permanent and semi-permanent properties behind our house. They told us that we needed to pay for access to the boathouse, boat launch, and summer water hookups. My parents said no thanks since they had town water and didn't need the seasonal water and, at the time, didn't have a boat. Fast forward a couple years, and the wife of the president of the HOA is walking her tiny dog in my parents' yard and doesn't clean up after it. Our dog is very territorial, so my parents give her a heads up and asks her not to walk her dog in our yard. Argument ensues, and my parents end up posting the land and putting up no trespassing signs to get the point across. Another couple years go by, and some woman from out of state comes in and says she has deeds to all of the roads and right-of-ways in our area, including our own, and is charging back maintenance and snow removal fees, which my parents and our only neighbor had done for the 10 years prior, and the neighbor had done for 30 years prior to that. My parents tell her to go F herself. Now, the HOA president, who lives on the adjacent property to us, warns her to open up our road because it is well maintained and doesn't have massive potholes and gives access to the water main. We say no, she sends trucks to do it, we take her to court. A few years of long, drawn-out legal battle ensues after that. My parents get frustrated enough to just buy our road and right-of-way so it can't be opened up. Fast forward another few years, HOA president sells his property and exchanges the HOA with some other people. New owner comes in and says he's opening our road and hooking up to the water main. We tell him no, and he sends trucks to do it anyway. The guy from the water company realizes whose property it is and says he's not effing with that. Tries to bring it up at the town meeting and more headache ensues. Town says you can't own a right-of-way, insert fuming parents. New neighbors to the back do not want the road opened and turn out to be some incredibly wealthy people spending summers in a multi-million-dollar home and tell my parents that they will pay a lawyer and take care of it. In the end, the guy ended up paying my parents for access and digging in the right-of-way, and nothing has happened since. I bought the third flat out of 5 in a top 10 U.S. city. The builder, let's call him Dick, was living on the top floor and finishing it up. A lot of contractors are weirdos and chain smokers like Dick. Like a lot of contractors, Dick was also completely self-centered. Dick was an effing psycho who rode a motorcycle, slept with women, and did good work. I was always wary of him, but the condo we bought was really lovely. So Dick has been living up there and working on the unit for a year. He gets into a lot of fights and complains about things that go wrong in our units, but he does fix what needs to be fixed in each owner's unit almost every time. But we are all very worried about how long it takes him to finish the top floor. This was supposed to be a double unit with a staircase going up the roof and a deck just for that unit. He finishes the unit in the end. I'll give you some equivalent numbers, but they're not quite right. Let's say that each of the tenants paid 500,000 yen for our unit. The real amounts will be kept secret. Dick was going to put the penthouse on the market for 750 yen. It's put on the market, but the market is rough and going down. He sells it in the end for 350k. All of us were shocked. It was a penthouse with 2 floors. It sold for almost 30% less than the one-story units that were half the size that everyone else bought. Dick told us he had to leave town because he was desperate and the market was bad. When the new tenant moves in, he's a white wannabe rapper whose wife plans parties. He's a harmless, nice guy who smokes a lot of pot, so what? He's only been in the building for about a month before he tells the board, "My ceiling is leaking." When his ceiling leaks, it means the water is coming from the roof, a common area for the HOA. We all knew right away what had happened. Dick knew there was a leak in the roof, so he sold the house for very little money and left town. It didn't rain that day, so the property passed inspection, and that was that. The white rapper dude wants the HOA to fix the roof that's leaking. Everyone else says, "No effing way. You only got an $800,000 house for $350,000 because Dick sold you a lemon. This is just between you and him. You need to sue him." And the dude is actually suing. He won a very large court case against Dick. I don't know how he did it. I had a lot of respect for him. If you want to watch the part 1, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, the likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for support.